Welcome back to Betrayal HQ Stories, where trust is tested, betrayal cuts deep, and revenge speaks louder than words. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, because every story we share will remind you of one truth. Loyalty is priceless, and those who throw it away always pay the cost. Today's story is about a man named David. To everyone around him, he looked like just another ordinary guy, punching a clock at his 9 to 5, living modestly with his longtime girlfriend Clara. But what no one knew, not Clara, not even his best friend Marcus, was that David had a secret worth more than money, a secret worth more than appearances. Because while Clara believed she was leaving behind an average man for a flashier life with Marcus, David was quietly building something she could never imagine, earning over $500,000 a year, while living like he had nothing. She thought she'd found an upgrade. She had no idea she'd just betrayed the very man holding the key to the life she always wanted. Before everything unraveled, my life looked quiet, ordinary, some would say. Most mornings I woke before sunrise, not because I had to, but because routine anchored me. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, strong and dark, the kind that clung to your shirt long after you left the house. Clara, my girlfriend, often teased me about being an old soul up early, reading the news at the table, keeping the same beat day after day. Our neighborhood wasn't flashy. Children rode their bikes in circles until porch lights blinked on. Dogs barked lazily from fenced yards, and neighbors waved while watering their lawns. Life was predictable, but in that predictability, I found comfort. I worked my 9 to 5, came home tired but content, and spent evenings with Clara, sometimes cooking together, sometimes just sitting close on the couch, watching old shows we'd seen a dozen times. From the outside, it looked like love wrapped in simplicity. And maybe it was. We didn't chase extravagance, not then. I carried the weight of duty quietly, paying bills on time, making sure Clara had what she needed, skipping luxuries for myself so she could smile. To her I was steady, reliable. To me, she was the reason I kept pushing forward. What Clara didn't know, what no one knew, was that beneath that quiet rhythm, I was building something far greater. A business I nurtured in silence, long after she'd gone to bed. While the neighborhood slept, I worked under the soft glow of my desk lamp, chasing something that promised more than an average paycheck. I never spoke of it, because I didn't want my worth tied to money. I wanted love to stand on its own. At the time, I believed it did. Looking back now, I realized the people around me were shaping my story long before I saw the truth. Clara, my girlfriend, was the center of my world. She had this way of smiling at me when I walked through the door. Warm at first, though over time I started noticing how her eyes didn't light up the same way. I brushed it off, telling myself she was tired or stressed. But deep down, a part of me knew those smiles were changing. Once, when I handed her flowers after a long day, she looked at them, forced a laugh, and said, "They're nice, but roses don't pay for vacations, David." It stung, but I swallowed it, choosing silence instead of confrontation. Then there was Marcus, my best friend since we were kids. Where I was steady, he was wild. He was the kind of man who turned every entrance into a performance. Loud laughs, expensive cologne, flashing his car keys like trophies. People gravitated to him, and I guess Clara wasn't immune. He'd pat me on the back and say, "One day, David, I'll drag you out of that routine of yours. You only live once, right?" I laughed along, but there was always a weight behind those words, like he thought I was missing something. I still remember a barbecue with friends, Clara at my side, Marcus across the yard bragging about his new watch. When I told a story about a project at work, Clara's laugh felt sharper than usual, and she leaned toward Marcus as if my words were background noise. My friends smiled politely, but I caught one of them glancing at me with pity. That glance cut deeper than her laughter. Even my coworkers played their part in these memories. They'd ask about Marcus when he picked me up from work, whispering, "That guy really lives large. You two couldn't be more different." I'd smile, nod, and go back to my desk, never correcting them. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the difference wasn't what it looked like on the surface. At the time, I told myself these little moments didn't matter. A smile that felt hollow, a comment that brushed against pride, a laugh that didn't sound like love. I ignored them, thinking love was stronger than small cracks. I didn't know those cracks were already spreading into something bigger. What mattered most to me wasn't money, or even recognition. It was respect. Not from strangers, not from friends, but from the woman I shared my life with. I could carry 100 burdens at work, fight through exhaustion, and still come home smiling, as long as Clara looked at me like I was enough. Her approval, her pride in who I was, that meant more than anything sitting in a bank account. I wasn't chasing riches to wave around like Marcus did. My drive came from something quieter. I grew up watching my father, an honest man who never had much, but whose word was trusted by everyone who knew him. He'd always say, "Son, your name is your real wealth. Protect it, and you'll never be poor." Those words stayed with me. More than any business plan or dollar earned, I wanted to live a life that honored that lesson. So when Clara laughed at my routines or compared me to Marcus, it wasn't just the words that cut, it was what they chipped away at inside me. Because if the person I loved most didn't see value in my sacrifices, then what was I holding on to? Every late night at the desk, every skipped luxury, every quiet gesture was meant to show her I was building something solid for us. I told myself loyalty mattered more than speed, that if I kept my head down, worked steadily, and built our foundation brick by brick, she'd see one day that it was all for her. But love is fragile when respect fades. And the truth I couldn't admit then was this: I wasn't just working to secure our future. I was working to prove myself worthy in her eyes. That was the anchor I clung to, the thing that kept me moving through long nights and heavy days. And it's why what came next nearly broke me. Because when betrayal stole that respect, it felt like I'd lost everything I had been fighting for. What mattered most to me wasn't the size of my paycheck or the kind of car parked in the driveway. It was Clara's respect. I could live without applause from the world, but I couldn't live without pride in her eyes. Every sacrifice I made, every late night at my desk, every dollar I chose to save instead of spend, it was all for her, for us. My father used to say, "A man's name is his real fortune. Don't ever trade it cheap." And I believed that. I wanted to build a life steady enough for Clara to lean on, strong enough to outlast hard times. More than wealth, more than recognition, I wanted to be worthy in her eyes. That was my anchor, the quiet reason behind everything I did. But anchors don't hold when the tide begins to change. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was small things I told myself not to notice. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when I came through the door. The way her phone lit up late at night, and she tilted the screen just slightly away from me. A laugh that sounded lighter with Marcus than it did with me. Sometimes, I'd reach for her hand at the dinner table, and she'd pull away saying she was tired. Once, I found the card for a boutique tucked into her purse, even though she'd told me she was saving. Another time, $100 missing from our account, brushed off as just groceries. I wanted to believe these were passing shadows, nothing permanent, but the silences stretched longer, the conversations shorter. And when I looked into her eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before: distance. I didn't know it yet, but what I was losing wasn't just her laughter or her touch. I was losing the respect that had been my anchor all along. And once that was gone, everything else began to slip with it. I still remember when things felt different, when loyalty wasn't a question, when love felt strong enough to weather anything. There was a night years back when I got laid off from a job. I came home broken, unsure of how we'd pay the bills. Clara held me close and whispered, "We'll figure it out together. As long as I have you, I have enough." Those words carried me through some of the hardest days of my life. Another time, when I was sick for weeks, she brought soup to my bedside every night, even falling asleep in the chair beside me. Back then, I never doubted her heart. She was my safe place. The reason I believed in building quietly, in working late, in planning for a better tomorrow. But now, those memories felt like ghosts haunting our kitchen table. Where once there had been warmth, now there was coldness. Where once there had been laughter, now silence. Every flashback to the love we shared made the distance between us sharper, more unbearable. I couldn't help but ask myself, when did we change, and how did I not see it happening? The answer came not in a fight, but in silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than shouting. One evening I came home early, flowers in hand, hoping to surprise Clara. I opened the door to her laughter, but it wasn't for me. Marcus was there, sitting on our couch, relaxed, comfortable in a way that made my stomach twist. Clara looked at me, her smile frozen, as if I had interrupted something. I set the flowers down on the counter. "You're home early," she said, her tone light but her eyes guilty. Marcus grinned, slapped me on the shoulder, and joked, "Man, you work too much." Clara was just keeping me company. His words were casual, but they landed heavy. I didn't fight. I didn't accuse. I simply nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. In that moment, the humiliation wasn't in what was said, it was in what wasn't. The shift was complete, and I was the stranger in my own home. That night, for the first time, I realized respect had already left the room. And without respect, love had no place to stay. I remember that night too clearly. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in my truck, keys still in the ignition, staring at the dashboard lights flickering against the windshield. My chest was tight, but no tears came. Just silence. I kept asking myself, how did we get here? When did her laughter stop being for me? When did Marcus become more than a friend at the barbecue? More than a man in my periphery? I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, but I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, listening to the hum of the street outside, the sound of a dog barking 2 houses down, the faint echo of Clara's laugh still in my ears. It's strange how silence can be louder than any fight. In that stillness, I realized something had already ended between us, long before the words were spoken. And that knowledge was heavier than anything I'd carried in my life. This wasn't the first time I had swallowed pain in the name of love. Years earlier, Marcus had gotten himself into trouble, gambling debt he couldn't pay. He came to me late one night, shame in his eyes, asking for help. I covered it quietly with money I couldn't afford to lose. I never told Clara. I told myself friendship was worth the sacrifice. And Clara, there were red flags I had ignored. She once confessed to texting someone from work, swearing it was nothing serious. I forgave her, choosing to believe loyalty could be rebuilt if I just held steady. All those choices, covering Marcus's mistakes, overlooking Clara's slips, they weren't just moments of weakness. They were bricks I laid into a foundation I thought would hold us together. And now, watching them drift closer while I sat alone in my truck, I realized that foundation had been cracking for years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. The final straw didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, like betrayal often does. One night I came home later than usual. The porch light was on, but the house felt different. Inside, the air smelled faintly of Marcus's cologne. I walked down the hallway and saw it, his jacket hanging on the back of a chair, his shoes by the door, where mine should have been. I stepped into the bedroom. Clara was there, sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone in her hand. She didn't even flinch when I walked in. She looked at me with a strange calm, almost rehearsed, and said, "David, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to stay." Marcus and I, well, we've already talked about it. It was like being erased from my own life, like the ground I'd been building on had been pulled out from under me. My rage wasn't loud. It was silent, pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream, but all I did was stand there, staring at the woman who had once sworn I was enough. That was the night I knew the respect I valued most was gone forever. I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask her why. I just walked back out into the night, the echo of my footsteps louder than her silence. In the days that followed, I made my choice not to chase chaos, but to prepare in silence. I sat at the bank, pulling statements. I called my lawyer, asked quiet questions. At night, while Clara and Marcus flaunted their new life online, I gathered receipts, checked balances, tightened every corner of my world. I never once confronted them, never once showed my hand. On the outside, it looked like I was broken, defeated, but inside, a calm resolve was taking shape. They thought I was powerless. They had no idea I had been building power all along. Silence became my weapon, restraint became my shield, and when the time came, my truth would speak louder than any fight ever could. Revenge never starts with fire, it starts with silence. I moved carefully, like a man walking across thin ice. No sudden moves, no raised voices, just small steps they wouldn't notice until it was too late. I transferred ownership of the car they thought I couldn't afford, shifted accounts, signed papers that sealed away everything I'd built under my own name alone. At the house, I stopped paying the bills tied to me. The lights flickered once, then twice, before Clara realized the account had been switched. When the landlord called, I let the voicemail play out. My name wasn't on the lease anymore. I even began recording small conversations, the careless things Marcus said when he thought no one was listening. I didn't plan to use them yet, but proof has a way of keeping the truth sharp. Through it all, I stayed calm, smiled at neighbors, nodded at coworkers. No one suspected a thing. While they laughed online, posting pictures of dinners and nights out, I was moving the ground out from under their feet, and they never even heard it cracking. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the glow of my laptop was the only light in the room, doubt crept in. Maybe I should have just walked away. Maybe I should have let them have it all and started fresh somewhere new. There were nights when the weight of it pressed down so heavy, I wondered if I was becoming someone I never wanted to be. I thought of my father's words again. Your name is your fortune. Don't trade it cheap. And I asked myself, was I trading mine now? Was I letting betrayal turn me into something darker than I could carry? The silence of those nights was the hardest part. I wasn't sure anymore if I was seeking justice or if I was just feeding a wound that would never heal. But every time I pictured Clara's laugh with Marcus, every time I remembered the way she told me to leave my own home, the answer became clear. I couldn't let betrayal end my story. Not like that. If there was going to be an ending, it would be mine to write. Clara and Marcus thought they'd won. They paraded around town like kings and queens of a new life, laughing louder, posting more often, making sure I'd see every picture. But arrogance always leaves fingerprints. Their mistake came at a party, one of Marcus's over-the-top celebrations. Someone recorded him boasting about how he had taken everything from David, even his girl, bragging about how Clara was living proof he'd always come out on top. The clip made its way back to me, not because I went looking, but because people love sharing a scandal. That was their overplay. The moment they stopped hiding and started gloating, they thought I was weak, finished. They never once imagined I had been building something stronger in silence, and that arrogance would cost them everything. I didn't shout. I didn't storm their door. I let justice speak in silence. One morning, Clara woke to a knock at the door, an envelope in the hand of a process server, legal papers, eviction notices, frozen accounts. Everything they thought they had was gone, piece by piece, pulled out from under them. Marcus's laughter disappeared when he tried to swipe his card and found the balance at 0. Clara's pride crumbled when she returned to the house and the locks had been changed. My name, the one thing I'd guarded all these years, was still intact, and theirs was in ruins. I never raised my voice. I never needed to. The storm came not with thunder, but with quiet rain, steady, relentless, impossible to ignore. And as they scrambled, I finally exhaled. Not in joy, not even in triumph. Just in peace, because the justice I carried wasn't about destroying them, it was about reclaiming myself. The silence afterward was louder than any fight we'd ever had. Clara didn't scream when the locks clicked behind her. She didn't cry when the eviction notice hit her hands. She just stood there, frozen, staring at me as if words could turn back time. Her eyes searched mine for the man who used to bring her flowers, who used to believe every excuse she gave. But he wasn't there anymore. Marcus raged. He cursed, slammed his fists, threatened lawsuits he couldn't afford, phone calls he'd never make. But even his anger fell flat when the reality sank in. There was nothing left to take. He had gambled and lost, not just money, but pride, reputation, and the one thing he thought he had stolen from me. Friends whispered, family stayed quiet. Some pitied Clara, others shook their heads at Marcus. But no one said much to me. Maybe they didn't know what to say, or maybe they finally understood that silence can be the sharpest blade of all. Sometimes the loudest scream isn't made with sound. It's the look in someone's eyes when they realize they've lost everything. I walked away from it all a different man. Not bitter, not broken, just changed. The man I used to be, the one who lived for Clara's approval, who measured his worth by her smile. That man was gone. In his place stood someone quieter, sharper, stronger. I had built wealth, yes, but more than that, I had built resilience. Did it cost me? Absolutely. There are nights when the loneliness settles in, when I miss what I thought love was, not what it turned out to be. But there's peace too. Peace in knowing that betrayal didn't end me. It refined me. I learned that loyalty can't be bought, respect can't be begged for, and love without truth is already halfway to betrayal. And as I stand here now, I know one thing for certain. I'll never again measure myself by someone else's eyes. My worth was never in their hands. It was in mine all along. There's one thing I still keep. Clara's old house key. Not because I'd ever let her use it again, but because of what it represents. I remember the day I first handed it to her, years ago, pressed into her palm with a smile. This is your home too, I told her. Back then it meant trust, partnership, a shared future. Now it sits in the top drawer of my desk, cold and unused. A reminder that not every promise lasts, and not every door should stay open. That little piece of metal carried the weight of my loyalty, and when she tossed it aside, she tossed away more than she realized. It reminds me that love without respect is just a lock waiting to be broken. And I learned to never give someone a key to everything if they don't know its worth. People often ask if I ever heard from Clara again. The truth? She did reach out once, late at night, months later, a message that simply read, "Can we talk?" I never answered. Some stories don't need an epilogue. Some doors should stay closed. But sometimes when I catch sight of that key in my desk, I wonder, did she regret the choice because of what she lost, or because of who I became without her? I may never know, and maybe that's the point. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it ends in silence, a silence heavy enough to echo for the rest of your life. I still ask myself sometimes, was I wrong? Was I wrong to protect what was mine? To draw the line where loyalty had already been erased? Some nights I replay it all in my head. The silence, the papers served, the doors locked behind them. Part of me wonders if I became the very thing I swore I'd never be. Cold, calculating, unbending. But then I remember the long nights, the sacrifices, the way my respect was tossed aside like it was nothing. So I leave the question to you. Was it justice? Or was it revenge dressed as silence? Maybe both. Maybe it doesn't matter. What I do know is this. Betrayal forces you to see yourself clearer than ever before. And once you've seen, you can't unsee. They thought I'd do nothing, that I'd fold, fade, disappear. But I waited, patiently, quietly, until the day came when they handed me the rope themselves, and all I had to do was let them pull. Every moment you've heard, every laugh, every silence, every cut, it's mine. Not told by friends, not whispered by neighbors, not handed down by anyone else. Just my memory, my eyes, my voice. Because when betrayal happens, no one else carries the weight the way you do. Everyone has opinions, but only the betrayed knows what it feels like to wake up in a house that doesn't feel like home anymore. To sit in a truck outside, gripping the wheel until your knuckles ache. To stand in your own doorway and realize you're a stranger in the life you built. So I won't dress this up with anyone else's words. This was my pain, my silence, my justice, and that's all you need to hear. Not every detail matters in the same measure. Some nights dragged on like years, while other months vanished in the blink of an eye. I could tell you about every argument, every cold glance, but that's not the story. The story is in the shifts, the moments that left a mark. Like the night she told me to leave. Like the weeks I spent gathering proof while the world thought I was broken. And then 5 months later, how I watched them unravel in silence, their confidence rotting into fear. Time has a way of bending when you're carrying betrayal. Days feel endless, years collapse into a single breath. But in the end, whether it took 5 months or 50, the lesson was the same. Betrayal may start in an instant, but justice takes its time. I've told you my story through my own eyes, but now I want you to sit with it. Would you have fought back, or would you have walked away and started fresh? What would you do if the very people you fed with your own hands turned around and left you starving? Do you believe silence is the strongest revenge, or should betrayal be met with fire and fury?
I don't have those answers for you. All I know is that betrayal tests the soul in ways money never can. And the choices you make in that moment, they define the rest of your life. So I'll leave it with you. What would you have done in my place?